Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help mental health professionals grow their dream practices and live a life they love. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building tips. We invite you to take advantage of our private practice paperwork and our signature marketing e-course. And we have a gift for you. This is the exact methodology we use to create our six-figure private pay practices and have helped many other therapists do the same. Go to privatepracticestartup.com and on the homepage, click the button to download a free copy of your dream private practice playbook. Now on to today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. I hope you guys are doing fantastic today. Today we're going to talk about a topic that you guys are most interested in, and a topic I don't think is talked enough about in our field for sure, and especially with the last 2 years as coming out of the pandemic, what has happened. But before I reveal our guest today and our topic, we hope that you guys joined us last week as Kate and I talked about how to create more freedom in your business. It was funny, before we hit the podcast, our podcast guest today was worried about, am I going to say enough? And I said, well, if you get me talking about business systems, some people would glaze over. But that was actually the topic that we talked, or part of the topic that we talked about last week on how to create more freedom in your business. Systems is one of the aspects of doing that. But we have other tips and tools and other great stuff in that podcast. So definitely check that out. But today, we are inviting first-time guest, Monica Helvey, licensed marriage and family therapist in both California and Texas, certified EMDR therapist and trauma specialist, talking about the crisis within the mental health crisis, therapist burnout, and exiting the field, which is, it's a real thing. So I'll be curious to see what she says. And, I know that there's going to be some of you listening to this podcast and it's very timely. So, listen, take it in, share it with others. And take care of yourself. So who's Monica? Monica is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Texas and California, and she is a trauma coach for audacious, high-achieving, overworked, and burned out therapists. She helps her clients find their inner badass again with insight and connection. She uses 21st century trauma-informed body-based interventions to help healers break through their stuckness and achieve authentic alignment with their best selves so they can do their best work. Fantastic intro, Monica. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. This is such an important topic, and it's unfortunate because so many therapists who have worked so hard to get their license and jump through all these amazing, difficult hoops to do the amazing work that they're doing, and then they're getting so burnt out that they're completely leaving the field. And maybe that's not what has to happen. Maybe there's other options. And with all of the extra stress and anxiety and unknowns that have come this past few years, 3 years really, with the pandemic, it's just added a whole other layer to that. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation here today. And where should we get started, Monica?
Well, before we dive in, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
Startup Nation, there's a lot of perks to being a private practice owner. However, doing your own bookkeeping and taxes is not one of them. How much should I pay myself? How much should I save for taxes? Do I have to pay those quarterly taxes? These are questions we hear from therapists all the time. That's why we've partnered with the folks at Herd to help you manage your private practice finances. On average, Herd saves therapists 60 hours per year in financial record keeping and $5,000 in taxes. How many more clients could you see if you got that 60 hours back? And when you join Herd, you get access to a team of tax pros who will guide you on your journey as you build your business. With peace of mind about your business finances, you can put more energy into client care where it matters the most. Schedule a free consultation today at joinherd.com/private practice startup. That's joinherd.com/private practice startup.
And like Kate said, where do you want? Well, I always like to dive in. How did you get started in the mental health field? And then how did you get passionate about this topic specifically?
So when I was little, I had one of those bookmarks with my name on it. I don't know if y'all remember those, but it actually had the meaning of my name on it and a little description about it. And I learned at that very young age that my name actually meant advisor. And I remember feeling at that time this is an assignment, right? Now I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, maybe that was a little bit of a trauma response, to make meaning of it in that way. But from there, again, I took that really deeply to heart. And like so many other therapists that I know, I found that people like naturally gravitated towards me. They felt safe to open up to me. We made connections and they felt seen and heard. And I just loved the way that felt. So naturally, I was curious about a psychology degree that led me into having to get a graduate degree if you want to do clinical work. So from my graduate program, I went directly, like many other therapists, into community mental health. And I did a lot of agency work. And I just continued to find that myself and so many of my colleagues were just so burnt out. But I'm not like talking about like the kind of burnt out where you're like medium toasty burnt out. Like we were fried, right? Like call the fire department, like there's smoke in the building. Like we were fried. And, it just really, at that time, I didn't have the capacity to really lean into what that meant or how we all got there or how we, as a community of therapists, continue to normalize it without looking at what can we do to actually do something about this? Like, there's obviously bigger systemic issues that need to be addressed, but like internally as individuals, what can we do? Right. So as I left agency work because of my burnout, I went into private practice and found that I was actually recreating a lot of the systems that I had learned in agency work. And I had sort of recreated a lot of those toxic dynamics. And once I realized, again, I'm recreating a pattern here, right? I was forced to kind of take some radical responsibility for what that meant. Like, what were the stories that I had that were contributing to these behaviors and these patterns that weren't working for me, that were taking me so far out of my alignment, and how I could learn from that, do something about that, heal from that, and then maybe how do I help other people do that too, right? So that as a community of therapists, we're not continuously running into this problem without figuring out where our power is in it.
I love all of that. That's amazing. And you know what? Therapists are amazing beings because it's like the constant want to look at, our responsibility, our role, what's working, what's not working, constant self-reflection, and being able to shift and alter that course is very interesting. And it sounds like, the bookmark led the path to becoming a therapist. And then, the agency work was, designed to kind of create your passion, and what you're, how you help others now. So that's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the mental health crisis within the crisis.
Yeah. So I think so many therapists, we know about the mental health crisis in America, right? We understand that there is a record high number of patients that are requesting access to care, or previously, even in previous decades, it was that they weren't accessing care. They didn't know how to access care, right? So I think that we've done a fair job in normalizing mental health and patients seeking out and reaching out for services. But the crisis within that is, again, one that's largely ignored or under-acknowledged, is that when professional therapists burn out and leave the field, right, there's not this huge influx of therapists behind them to replace them, right? It takes years to get your degree. It takes years to get your hours to become licensed. And so if they're burning out right out of grad school, or they're burning out right in their internship process, or newly licensed, and they're not leaving to a different agency, they're not leaving to start their own private practice. In some cases, they're leaving altogether, right? So this is a big concern in terms of, again, patients being able to access care. There was a recent healthcare study that surveyed 37 clinics, and they found that for every 13 clinicians that was leaving the outpatient community mental health clinic, only 10 could be found to replace them. So wow. That's staggering, right? Like this means that fewer patients than even before the pandemic are able to access care at this point.
Yeah, it's such a challenge. And then I'm glad you mentioned with the novice clinicians who are just getting out of school, they're at most risk for burnout in the first place because they haven't figured out a lot of the how to handle, the vicarious traumatization and compassion fatigue and those different aspects. And they're thrown right into the deep end and expected to swim. And so many of them sink. And,
we're not setting them up for success.
Yeah.
I mean, we're throwing them in, but there's not even enough licensed therapists to supervise them, to provide even really good clinical supervision. If they're burnt out also, if the supervisors are burnt out and are somewhat like, talk to me about your cases, but they don't maybe have as much spaciousness to really do the deep dives or to identify where this newer clinician might be feeling stuck or afraid or guilty or shameful for what they're experiencing. I mean, again, we're not setting them up for success.
You're making me think about my own experience when I first got into community mental health. I was trying to get my licensure hours, and my supervisor was so burnout and just basically was like, "Oh, sounds like you're doing a great job." And I'm like, I'm like a sponge ready to soak up how to learn and how to, I'm handling all of these intense cases. I need to seek supervision elsewhere. And I paid privately for my supervision at the time to get a really amazing supervisor, and she was phenomenal, and I'm so glad that I did.
And it's so important that even we be reminded that that's an option, right? Because if you're running into a situation where maybe your supervisor is that clinician who's super soul burnt out, right, and they just don't have the spaciousness to really help you conceptualize cases in a way that's thorough, we need to be able to be reminded that there's alternatives to just which cards you're dealt in the agency.
Yeah. Let's take a quick moment for our sponsor, and then we'll jump into those alternatives and what we do about all of this.
Directories can be a good source for new clients, but which directories are really worth it? Well, according to an extensive review of therapist directories by Very Well Mind, more than 90% of therapists recommend Mental Health Match. We love Mental Health Match because they understand that the therapeutic relationship starts even before the client contacts you. They've set up their directory to give clients a sense of confidence in you as a clinician and connection with you as a person. Their smart matching technology makes sure you only hear from clients who are a good fit for your practice. And referrals come with insightful information about the client, their presenting problems, and what they seek in a therapist. With over 10,000 clients coming every week, Mental Health Match is a great way to find the clients you want. Erin Moore, a New Jersey therapist, said, "I've been getting almost 2 referrals a week from Mental Health Match, and I like their ability to match me with my niche clients. These clients reflect my skill sets, and they come ready and open to the therapeutic process. This is energizing for both the therapist and clients. We could not agree more. And now you can try Mental Health Match for free for 90 days. Just go to mentalhealthmatch.com and use referral code STARTUP. That's mentalhealthmatch.com and referral code STARTUP.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribing incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. Look, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR available today with 4.9 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot and Google. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS as in Private Practice Startup and receive a special 2-month trial, absolutely free. And hey, if you're coming from another EHR, no worries. Therapy Notes will import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost to you so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS for your 2-month free trial. So Monica, where do we go from here? So we've identified the crisis within the crisis, but what do we do about it?
Yes, such a great question. So I think a lot of therapists have this fantasy that if they leave the field, that will solve the problem, right? That their burnout will go away and that'll be it, right? But the problem is that we bring ourselves everywhere we go. And if we have unconscious patterns that we're not aware of, that we're not addressing, and we're not healing, then again, in a deep nervous system way, we are hardwired we are familiarized with toxic environments, we're going to continue to seek out those toxic dynamics or recreate them, like what I did in my first few years of private practice, right? Just because they're so familiar, they're so ingrained, they're so hardwired. So I think the first thing that therapists have to do is they have to be really freaking honest about where they're at and how much of a problem this might be for them. Just like what we tell our clients, right? Like, you can't heal what you can't acknowledge, right? Like, we have to acknowledge where we're at. And then we have to take radical responsibility to do that internal deep dive into our patterns, our beliefs, our responses, so that we can really recover from where we've been and really set ourselves up for more success going forward.
Nice. And so do you recommend that people do this with another therapist, coaching? Is there books that you recommend?
Yeah. So what I would say is, like, this doesn't have to be a hero's journey, right? So many of us have been walking this path, and we've felt guilty or ashamed or afraid to speak out to our coworkers, our supervisors, our administrators about what we're experiencing. And so we just think, like, well, this is just what it means to be a therapist. I see all kinds of memes that say that this is just what it is. And, like, no, it doesn't have to be a solo journey, right? So reach out for support. We do our best work, our deepest healing when we're in connection with others, right? Like, that really helps us to expose some of those angles that we might not have been able to see from our own perspective. And so I would really encourage these clinicians to get into some deep diving one-on-one work, right? Where, again, we're looking at recovering and recalibrating at a nervous system level, okay? Because if we start with just the thoughts or the beliefs or the patterns, we're still missing the fact that you've been under such stress for so long that dysregulates the entire nervous system. And your nervous system really needs some safety to be able to come up and out and move towards some change.
Nice. And I know that you kind of alluded to and shared, you were in the community mental health and you went to private practice and you started recreating the same stuff. Can you share with us a little bit about that? And then what was the pinnacle moment for you where you're like, aha, I gotta do something about this here. It's me.
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. Yeah, totally. So I was in a supervisory role, quality compliance role in agency work. So I knew the documentation had to be on point. I knew the paperwork had to be on point. Like, I set up those systems to be, squared away, like legal, ethical, everything's going to be squared away. I took insurance and I just burnt myself out. Like, I was seeing too many clients. I was expecting myself to do exactly what I did at county mental health. Like, if they had me seeing X amount of clients a week, I was going to do that in my private practice. And I literally became my own worst enemy, So I was just noticing, like, man, I don't want to go to work and I'm my own boss. Like, what is happening here? Right? So that really forced me to confront the fact that I had recreated the very system that I was trying to leave. And when I started asking questions again of myself, and then taking in podcasts and other things, I was like, oh, there's this little thing in the back of my, mind that's sort of driving this process, because it's so familiar, and familiarity is safe to the nervous system, even if it's toxic.
Interesting. I've never heard it stated like that, but that makes total sense. It's like, oh yeah, I know this feeling. It's not, my friend would often says, but the devil that you know, than the devil that you don't know. Right.
Absolutely. Yep. That's exactly it.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit more. So we're talking a little bit about overall, like, what to do about it. And what's, I guess, like, what's possible, so we do our work and what?
Yeah. Well, I think what's possible is whatever is in the heart and mind of the clinician, right? I think so much of burnout and being under toxic stress means that we disconnect from ourselves and we lose connection with what our dreams and desires are. And that's an individual thing for every single person. And so you can't begin to even conceive of what you want or what you're aiming towards in terms of a deeper desire until you can get reconnected with yourself, right? And the only way we can reconnect is if it's safe. And so again, it kind of comes back full circle why that work is so important to do, so that we can access more movement and freedom and alignment, positioning ourselves towards more alignment.
Yeah, I love how you're talking about this really introspective process and looking at your relationship with your business and your life and your clients and all of this from all of these different levels and on a nervous system level. And it's fascinating. And this is such an important piece of the work and key to being able to build your business in a way that it works in alignment with your life at these different stages of life that you are in. And so many people don't take a step back to look at that, and they just keep plowing through because they think they have to, and there's no other options, and they're drowning and eventually leave the field. So to take that step back, even though it can feel counterintuitive, is so, so, so important to being able to gain that clarity about what direction you need to go in and how you need to make the changes in your business so that it's working in alignment with your lifestyle goals and wants and dreams and all of that, because it's absolutely possible. And I like how you mentioned that, it all depends on what's in the heart and the mind of the clinician and the practice owner, and whatever that vision is and that goal is for them, it's going to be completely different for each person. So to step back and really get clear on that and what's in the way and working on that is priceless.
Yes, absolutely. So many therapists are craving the ability to really connect and have like this authenticity. And it's the misalignment of that in their work sometimes where they're experiencing the burnout that causes them to have so much dysregulation. And so because we're craving that connection and authenticity, we have to remember that it starts with us, right? Just like we tell our clients, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Like we have to learn how to come inwards, take radical responsibility for what is going on for us so that we can serve ourselves first. And not again in this way where so many caregivers are like, serve myself first. What? I don't know how to do that, right? We have to learn how, so that we can continue to pour out and do exceptional clinical work. Like it always comes back to that. It's not just about learning how to recalibrate and heal our nervous system just because I'm burnt out, I need that for me. Yes, absolutely. But you don't understand, it is going to transform the caliber of your work, which makes it more easeful. And then you're more it's more rewarding and it's more meaningful and connecting, and it pours back into you, right? So it's this reciprocity that can happen when we do our work.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm just kind of sitting in that. I like that. And of course, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own reflections. And interestingly enough, I had this realization coming into this year. I was like, wow, I've been in business for 13 years now. And I've treated myself like an employee in the sense, I gave myself one week vacation last year. What? I go on a lot of long, long weekend trips, but I'm like, but this is insane. If I were 13 years into a community mental health job, at least I'd have 4 weeks vacation. You know what I mean? It's
absolutely
crazy. So the plowing through, and I think, as a business owner, as a human, and, being in this kind of mid stage of life where you're balancing all the things, there's just a lot to do. And if you don't kind of keep it going, it just kind of falls. But, Kate and I constantly talk about working on the business. And for me, this year, it's working on me, right? And working on what do I want and what's important to me. And I know for me, the vacations are important, the time away, because that's where I'm creative. That's where the brain is quiet. That's where I can think. And then I get a better bird's eye view of is this working? Is this not working? And it's interesting, Monica, you were talking about the authenticity piece for me. So I've stepped out of full-time private practice 2.5 years ago to do another business venture, but I actually miss the deep, authentic conversations with clients, right? Because we're not usually, well, not everyone, but I'm thankful to have some really close therapist friends where we can have these deep conversations, but the general public and general people in our life don't have these types of conversations. And I just I bring books sometimes with deep questions, let's have a different conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great point too, because that's why we need connection to heal, right?
Yeah.
If we're trying to get a deeper level of healing, that connection, that authenticity in the presence of another safe person is what really helps us to oh, wow, I haven't thought that. Oh, wow. Now I've integrated what I feel and believe and value about that because I've talked about it to someone else, right? It's not just in my head.
Right. Cool stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you work with therapists and kind of coach them through this.
Yeah. So like in my bio, I use 21st century trauma informed interventions. And what has surprised me is that so many grad schools are still not really talking about the nervous system or polyvagal theory or some of these other approaches that are now more researched and more evidence-based, right? And we're still not using them in grad school. And it's like a head scratcher for me because they are profoundly effective. And when I was, searching for my own therapist to help me do these deep dives and ask these questions, I was finding that like some of these therapists they didn't have the ability to hold enough space for me that I could get out of my head, right? Not just talk about what I was feeling or think about what I was feeling, but really feel it, right? Really absorb it and integrate it. Like I could do all the reframes all day long. I could rationalize my patterns and my thinking all day long, but I wasn't absorbing it and able to step out of that pattern until I did more somatic body-based interventions. And so the way I work with my clients is a very bottom-up approach. I utilize EMDR, I utilize somatic interventions, some internal family systems parts work. And I find that the blend of all of that together really helps my clients who oftentimes tend to be kind of heady, the intellectualizers, high achievers, the CEOs, the entrepreneurs, and I can help them kind of pivot just a little bit to where they're able to go, oh, I can feel the shift there, right? And it's those big ahas that just like light me up, and I just feel so energized by the work. And again, it doesn't feel like I'm plowing through anymore, right? It's like I get to show up.
Very cool. Yeah. I love it all. It's awesome. I very much enjoyed you sharing and listening to your story and watching you light up as you talk about this process. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I often talk about in business is, business, when you're a business owner, and you're an owner that takes responsibility, is business is a mirror, and it shows you, where not just your business isn't working, right? And you've had that realization. You went from community mental health. You thought, I won't be burnt out if I start my own private practice. And there it is. And that's what led you into your work. I remember probably a year and a half ago, which led me back into therapy, is I had this response from this interaction, and it was like sitting in me in my heart for like 2 hours, and I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. And I'm like, okay, this is not right. Thank God I'm, a therapist, and I have the wherewithal to realize that. But I think the beauty sometime of being in business, if we look at that and take a moment to see, is our business and what we're doing in the world of business, if we're not attuned to the relationship stuff, or we think we've done enough of the work on that, right? Because then it's never over, that the business will reflect back another place where we're like, yeah, this isn't working, and where is this relevant? So, I've been back in therapy for a year and a half working on all this stuff again.
Good for you. Way to leave it.
Yeah. And it's helpful, right? And it's, we're speaking to therapists, but it's always those little, like, they're very subtle. It's never anything like a huge shift where we're like, oh, monumental change. That's amazing. You know what I mean? It's just being able to set better boundaries, having different communication, and the impact of that. So I appreciate
it's like 1 millimeter better, but like consistently over time makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yes. So I appreciate the commitment that you have to therapists in the field, and the work that you do helping our therapists, whether they stay in the field or not, at least there's an awareness, that they're not leaving because they're burnt out.
Absolutely. And I think, again, whether they stay in the field or leave the field, it's ultimately going to be important for them to heal from their experiences and not recreate that. Because listen, if they take that job at Whole Foods, they'll probably recreate those dynamics there too, right? Like, because that is what it is. We take ourselves everywhere we go, right? So it's important to be attuned. Like you were mentioning, we have to attune inwards, and sometimes we can't do that when we're in that survival mode, right? When we're just moving and plowing forward, right? So being able to notice, like, hey, I'm in survival mode. I need to step back here. I need to tune in and dive in and do this work so that I don't recreate this everywhere else I go.
Yeah. So what do you want our audience to most take away from your message today?
Yeah, I want them to know that there's hope, right? Like you were mentioning, they've worked so hard to get where they are. And to leave the field and all their training and everything that they've built, licensing tests, like all of that, to leave it behind is not an easy decision to make. but it's often one that's made out of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I just want clinicians to be honest with themselves and get curious with themselves about what they need in order to deeply heal their nervous system so that they can sustain their work in this field. I think that we can do a lot of work in terms of, taking the vacations and meditating, and those things are good. Those are great skills, but we need that's like a rebound skill. Like that's being able to recover skill, resiliency skill. We need those for sure. But to sustain the work, that requires a deeper skill.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And I know that you have a giveaway for our audience. What is that?
Yeah. So I am going to be offering your listeners a discount to work with me for coaching to do this deeper healing work. It's either for one-on-one or for my group healing course, which is called Hope for Healers. So they can check out my website and get on there's a contact form for that, and just let me know which service you're interested in and mention the podcast in that inquiry, and I'll know to go ahead and apply that discount.
Awesome. Well, Monica, it's just been a joy and a pleasure to have you, and one of our first time guests. So it was nice to be able to meet you, and we're glad that you reached out to us about this very important topic. Startup Nation, we hope you check us out next time as we talk about a podcast that's pretty relevant to kind of what we're talking about. I feel like Monica set the way. We're going to be talking with Christy Pearl about understanding boundary issues and how they show up in private practice. So 2 great podcasts back to back. I'm going to say that's kind of like a part 2 of Monica's part 1 here. So join us next time.
Awesome. Good. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, Monica, this conversation was so great. I was just soaking it all in and sitting back a little bit because it's very powerful, the message that you shared today. And I hope that the clinicians listening with Startup Nation really take a step back and evaluate where they are in their life, where they are in their practice, and whether they're in alignment or they need to realign and recalibrate. Yes. And that it's absolutely possible to do so. So thank you for your inspirational message today. And Startup Nation, we hope you enjoyed this episode with Monica today and that it speaks to you. And we always love to hear from you. So we want to encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review our show. Of course, share with any colleagues who may need to hear this message today, because that allows us to help more people across the globe. And if there's a topic that we have not talked about in all of these episodes that we've had, please reach out to us and let us know. We would love to hear from you, and hope you stay inspired and continue doing the amazing work that you do. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you again.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.